Hello, all you wonderful fools. It's time for the Mizzah Tee Show.
Here we go, let's start the show. Hosted by Mizzah Tee. Nintendo video games, all the favorite ones for me. News and reviews, some gameplay too. Battle and drills is what I do. My day, said I ain't just the show by Mizzah Tee. It's the show by Mizzah Tee. Hey there, fools. Big T here, and I'm back with another video. And this video is one that's close to my heart. If you guys probably know, if you've been around on the channel a while, I'm a bit of a gaming collector. The gaming historian in me has, over the years, turned me into a collector. Because I just started off just buying a lot of video games. Like, I just love video games. I just the technology of them, just the art. Not even just like in-game art, but I'm talking about like box art, stuff like that. Just the whole culture of video games is a big thing for me, and I partake in that stuff. I know not every gamer does, but for me, that's a big part of me being a gamer, is the kind of historical aspects of it. And so I kind of fell into collecting because it wasn't something I set out to do. But after a while, I realized, I looked around, I had so many games, and I was like, well, what don't I have? What don't I have that I really want? That's kind of one of the things that pushed me to make this video. It was about those things out there that I still want. And, there's not a whole lot of stuff that I still want, but the stuff that I want is what I refer to as like holy grail type of stuff, which is very expensive things. As far as what I'm going to be mentioning here, it's mostly going to be kind of add-on peripherals to certain game systems that I've had over the years that I still have. All right, so I want to start first with the games that I consider the holy grails that I still want. And for me, they're not many. For you to fall into this category, you got to be kind of expensive. So there's expensive games out there that I still want, but I don't consider them holy grails that, eventually I'm a, mess around and throw the money at them. But for the most part, the gaming or video game holy grail that I'm looking forward to is on a console that's very expensive to collect for. It's pretty much been that way for the last, 15 or so years. It's been an expensive console to collect for, and that is the Sega Saturn. Almost my all-time favorite game console of all time. I had to disqualify it, as I mentioned before, because a lot of the experiences on it are from the East. There are a lot of games, great games came out on that system, but only in Japan. So that's why I had to kind of knock it down under the N64, which is my favorite. And then, yes, there is a holy grail device that I'm looking for on that. So first up, a Sega Saturn game that's actually in my collection, but I only have the Japanese version, but it makes it very hard to play this game. And that is Panzer Dragoon Saga. Yes, the lone RPG of the series for the Panzer Dragoon series. That was a mostly Sega Saturn series, but they also made Panzer Dragoon Orta for the original Xbox. Probably would have came out on the Dreamcast, but the Dreamcast obviously failed in sales, and so Sega pushed quite a few of their games that they were probably planning for Dreamcast over to the original Xbox. So that's reason why I jumped on the original Xbox, because all those Sega games that I wanted for my Dreamcast that only came out on the Xbox, and they spread some to PS2 as well, and GameCube, but mostly to the original Xbox. And yeah, Panzer Dragoon Saga, great game, a great. It's not the last game, because Orta was obviously the last game, and it's not even technically in the series. It's somewhat of a spin-off, which is weird because it's this big epic RPG, but it's not like the other two games, Panzer Dragoon and Panzer Dragoon 2 Zwei, or Zwei, however you pronounce it. But it's just a great, huge, epic RPG. Only came out in the Sega Saturn, and that's one of the reasons it's very hard to find and to collect. But another reason is that it came out really late on the Sega Saturn. I think it came out in '98, and Sega Saturn was pretty much dead. And somehow we got a North American release, PAL version as well. But we got an English release in North America, and it's super rare because I think they produced 5,000 to 10,000 copies or something like that. And so they're, starting around 450 range, but a complete kind of mint in case edition will probably run you $750 to $800, and it's super expensive. And I probably rented it from Hollywood Video or something, and just didn't get into it because at first it wasn't like the other two games, so I probably kind of not realize it because it wasn't all that information that we have today back then. So I probably just rented it thinking it was like 1 and 2, and it wasn't. And I wasn't expecting a big epic RPG, so it kind of threw me off, and I never ended up buying it. But later on I realized how amazing it was through just like reading about it and whatnot, and just seeing gameplay. And I went back to buy it, and it was pretty expensive. Actually, when I went back to buy it at that time, it was probably around $400 for a mint condition version, and I wish I would have got it then. But I was probably in college and I didn't have a whole lot of funds, so I didn't do it. So I'm looking for any version, either the PAL version or the North American version, and just putting the funds together, because again, I have other holy grails on this list that I would also like to get. It's hard to pull the trigger and decide which one I'm going to get, if I'm going to spend that money. So yeah, that's definitely on one of my holy grails to get list. Panzer Dragoon Saga English version, PAL or North American version for sure. Would love to get it. Next on my list, we're gonna move to the coveted GameCube, the GameCube system. And this is actually not an add-on to the GameCube system, but it is a wholly unique version of the GameCube system that only released in Japan, and that's the Panasonic Cube. Panasonic Cube, in case you guys don't know, was basically a version of the GameCube that was a DVD player. This version was actually a DVD player first that could play GameCube games, but it aesthetically it looked like a futuristic kind of Nintendo GameCube, because it had like that kind of mirror glass finish, silvery finish, and it had like the LED display that was really cool with the blue lights and all that. It's a gorgeous looking device, and not a whole lot of them right now run well or completely work, but there are versions out there that still work, and it's pretty expensive. I think on the lower end you could probably pick up one for about $600. On the higher end, if you want a nice one that actually works, you're looking at about $8 or $9, or around the price of Panzer Dragoon actually. But they're not as rare, because they did have a full launch in Japan, but obviously they came out nowhere else. So if you want to get one, you got to get one from Japan usually, and they're somewhat expensive. So that's also on that holy grail list to get. I'm going to get it at some point, no doubt. All right, and so the last thing on this list, the Trinity and the holy grail Trinity things that I want to get for my gaming collection, is for my favorite game system of all time, and that's the Nintendo 64. And yes, it's the vaunted, beautiful N64DD, the disc drive that never came out here. I used to read about this thing pretty much since I started reading about the Ultra 64. Nintendo was in the works with this thing because they knew that storage was going to be an issue on the N64, and they wanted to rectify that somewhat by adding these kind of floppy disks versions of games, not unlike the Super Famicom disc drive. It's very much similar to that. I think that's where Nintendo got the inspiration for this. And that only came out in Japan, and it turns out the N64DD also only came out in Japan. Now, where the Famicom disk system was somewhat successful in Japan, they just ended up never doing it overseas, because the cost of chips and prices went down for cartridges, so they didn't see a need to launch an add-on that a lot of people probably wouldn't buy in other regions, so they didn't do it there. But as far as the 64DD goes, it was just a failure. It was a commercial failure in Japan, so Nintendo decided not to release it anywhere else. They had a lot of games slated to come out for the system. Zelda was one of them. It was Aura Zelda, basically a version of Zelda with the Master Quest, but obviously that came out later. I think the GameCube was the first to get the Master Quest version of Zelda 64, or Ocarina of Time. and they had stuff like F-Zero and Mario Paint, and those games actually did come out, and F-Zero had cool features like track editors and all this kind of stuff. So it was going to add on to what you could actually do to your games. You know, it was kind of like the first DLC basically, and it was a really cool concept, a really cool device that we never got here. Now, a few years ago, someone discovered, I believe it was Metal Jesus Rocks, is the channel that I love to watch. He has a lot of retro stuff. He does a lot of stuff. He used to work for Sierra. He has a huge history with video games. Love watching his channel. And he found a US version, a prototype for the N64 DD. And it booted up. It was, in English, and it said USA on it. And it was, so they were really close to still releasing this thing, having that US prototype. Now the problem is that none of the games that were released that were released in Japan works on the US prototype because they were Japanese games. So if you're gonna get one, you want to get a Japanese version of the 64 DD because that's where all the games are. And yeah, I just loved how those discs look, the cartridge disc, if you want to call them, the floppies, the visual design of them. I love that, and I just love the whole idea of it. And it also added online capability to the N64, so that way you can download other people's tracks in something like F-Zero X for N64. And so there was that aspect to it as well. I think Doshin the Giant had some stuff. So I love that aspect of Nintendo with the creativity, and that's why I love the N64, because it was such a creative console where they had all these concepts and ideas. All of them didn't come to fruition, but a lot of them did, and 64 DD is definitely something I want. A few years ago, I probably could have got one for like $400. Now they're $800 to $1,000 plus, and I'm really kicking myself for not getting it back then. And yeah, so that's one of those things that's hard to just pull the trigger on, because there's a lot of things you can do with $800, and it's not buying a defunct peripheral for a game console from 25 years ago. So it's just a hard trigger to pull. Even I do have the money to do it. It's just those are my what do I call them, my trinity of holy grails when it comes to gaming. These are things that I really want. They're at the top. They're definitely on the top end of stuff that I want. And as far as difficulty to purchase, for obvious reasons, the price and whatnot. So I'm going to get them at some point. Definitely going to get them. But I just wanted to share that with you guys. Share the cool, kind of backstory with me and these devices and games. Sega Saturn, man. Sega Saturn. I love that console. But for the best games, you're gonna be spending some good money, and unfortunately Sega doesn't want to re-release these games. I know they had an issue with Panzer Dragoon Saga where they lost the source code. I don't know how they did that, but they lost the source code to the game, so re-releasing it on other platforms is proven difficult. But there's got to be some guy or somewhere who can reverse engineer that thing and make it happen. I believe there's emulators for it, so there should be a way to get this game on other systems. But I want that Sega Saturn version. Want it in my collection. So yeah, there it is, guys. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you leave a like. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Hit that notification bell, because that is very important these days on YouTube with that algorithm and how you get to see our content and whatnot. So make sure you do that. And thank you guys again for watching and listening, and see you fools next time. Peace out.